Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone to this DSM Forward event. I'm Mike Caldwell. I'm with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and I'd like to thank you all for attending today. The event's presented by the partnership as part of our DSM Forward initiative. Our goal is to help business leaders connect, share, and exchange information across businesses, nonprofit organizations, the community in general. And we've created some playbooks that are available on our website on restarting and getting going forward. So feel free to check that out at dsmpartnership.com/DSM Forward. So today I have with me three very, very wonderful people here, and I'd like to introduce to you, well, you may already know many of these people: Elizabeth Buck, President, United Way of Central Iowa; Sally Dix, the Executive Director of Bravo Greater Des Moines; and Christy Noss, President of Des Moines, or the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. So welcome to all of you. Just logistically, and then we'll get this out of the way. I just ask everyone that's not participating in the call as one of the panelists, just go ahead and if you would, mute your microphone. If you'd like, turn off your video to save bandwidth. Please open up the chat window. Zoom has a nice chat feature. We're going to be using that for taking your questions. So we'd love to have this be a conversation. We've got some content, but we'd really rather turn it into a conversation. So I want to encourage all of you to go ahead and be thinking of the questions you'd like to ask and start putting those into the chat window whenever you are ready. It should be available to you. And so with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and get back to those of us who are the panelists and get started. So I'd like to start off by asking each of the three panelists, and Sally, maybe we can just start with you, random order here. What's the impact then to your organization as it stands today? Where, where are you today and with the impact of all of this?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, Bravo's very lucky. We don't do programs. We don't have audiences that we serve directly. We have a small team, so we can be nimble and we can respond as new information is coming in. All that said, Bravo is also 99% funded with hotel motel taxes. So we are looking at a dramatically changed landscape for our function. And we are intentionally designed not to have or pursue other revenue streams. So we will remain reliant on hotel motel tax. So we're looking at a very long-term impact for our organization, and have had some of the same decisions that everyone, I think, on this call and everyone in our community has had. We've had hiring freezes, and our staff is furloughed and partially furloughed, and we've made some reductions in force, and we're looking at how we evolve and iterate for the future.
Elizabeth, would you like to go next?
Sure. I would say that COVID-19 has impacted almost everything that United Way of Central Iowa does. Our framework that we organize around is give, advocate, and volunteer. So you can imagine that we are expecting that our 2020 campaign will be down. We raise our funds through campaigns run at corporations, mostly about 95% of our donations come from campaigns in almost 600 different corporations in Central Iowa. Our advocacy obviously has changed also just due to the large impact on so many nonprofits in our community and the way they're able to operate. And then, of course, volunteering looks very different for us too. We put together a portal on our website that allows nonprofits and others to post any kind of volunteer or donation needs that they have. So we've seen a large number of Central Iowans who are using that as a way to figure out how they can stay engaged. But I would say that one of the biggest ways that our operations and our presence has changed is around something that hopefully all of you know about, which is 211. We have operated 211 here in Central Iowa for a long time, and we operate out of United Way of Central Iowa 211 for 57 of the 99 counties. And when we were stood up in early March to be the COVID hotline, I don't think we had any idea what that would look like for us. We've seen a 330% increase in call volume on that line. So we've deployed 20 of our staff members at the peak were answering calls. So It's had a big impact on us at United Way, and this is what we're built to do, is to help to unite our community when there are issues and problems like this. But this one has been so different because it's impacted everyone. When we've seen disasters or other ways that United Way has been engaged, it usually is focused on a particular area in our community, but this one is impacting all of us. So it's had a massive impact on United Way and in our community.
Christy, maybe you could go next.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for hosting this to the partnership. And, I wish that all of you on the call could kind of see behind the scenes how much we, the panelists here, but also the partnership, are working together during this time. We are on the phone or in each other's faces in this way just about constantly on behalf of the sector and on behalf of our community. And that really, I think, has been a proof point in all of this, is those trusting relationships that we've had over time have really played out well for us during times of challenge. In terms of administration and operation of the Community Foundation, we pivoted very quickly to move to remote work. However, we did have a few staff members who continued to be at the foundation. And now we're back in the Finkbein Mansion, working in our offices with half the staff in at a time, because in this building, we simply can't physically distance the way we need to with the full staff here. So we'll continue working through that, as I know many of you are doing, as you're talking about reentry or as you've had to do during COVID. In terms of just our budget and administration, we live off the administrative fees of the various charitable funds that we hold on behalf of the charitable sector. And then we've got some revenue generating programs like our nonprofit accounting services program as well. So the good news is we continue to generate administrative fees off of those funds and through the nonprofit accounting services program. The bad news is obviously investment returns were down, so that the value of those funds have decreased. However, we're definitely seeing that come back up, as the rest of the world is, as they're looking at the market. So bottom line, we're doing okay related to our financial performance at the Community Foundation. We are seeing a lot of giving, and I'm sure we'll get into this conversation later on, and we can talk about that then, but very busy in terms of donors who have funds at the Community Foundation contributing out to the community. But at the same time, we are still seeing donors set up new funds, and I think in this time, we've definitely seen people in the community and beyond having conversations about their estate plan and planned giving opportunities. And again, I'm sure that'll be a topic later on. In terms of just sort of the output, I think you've probably seen that out of the Community Foundation. We just pumped up the volume in terms of what we could offer out to the nonprofit sector, and on behalf of the nonprofit sector, we probably put out more content and just opportunities to get information out, or webinars put together more in the last 3-4 months than we do in an entire year typically. So just really put the hammer down and worked hard as a staff team to listen to what the needs were and develop the content and get it out.
Yeah, I think all of your organizations did, and I know that's the case in the partnership. A lot of us pivoted into different roles and just kind of did what it took. And I think you're right about the relationships. They're so critical. And speaking of relationships, each one of you have a board of directors that really governs and sets direction for you. I'm curious, and Christy, I'll just go back to you. Could each of you talk just a bit about how is it working with your board? I mean, without getting into names, we don't want to, none of that, but just tell us about how the board work is going.
Yeah, we've had to hold several emergency meetings of, especially like our grant making committee. When it comes to grant making during times like this, it's not business as usual. You have to pivot. You have to be proactive, you have to be responsive. So we immediately, as we were deploying the disaster recovery fund on behalf of the community, needed to get together because we wanted to seed that. We wanted to move quickly. We've pulled our executive committee together very quickly, and they've been super responsive to that. It does help that people's calendars perhaps have cleared up a bit more and you're able to get them on virtually more quickly. But they've just been so responsive, and I think just supportive of really staff's ideas and innovations, but yet the things that we need their input on. And then two, I will call out names. I am lucky to have Dr. Richard Deming as my board chair right now, because, you know, even as we're re-entering, if I'm feeling, you know, I'm watching the case numbers go up, I'm seeing, you know, what's happening in our community. I'm definitely hearing from our staff. So it does help to have the ability to literally talk at 8 o'clock in the evening to say, are we still okay? Is our plan on track? You agree with me here? And so I've definitely used that. You could ask him. Yes.
Elizabeth, what about you? How has your board been during this experience?
Yeah, very similar to what Christy is sharing. We're fortunate. We have a large board. I don't know how big Christy's is, but ours is around 32, 35 individuals. Yeah, and so they have a lot of expertise that I've been able to lean on. Many of them are corporate leaders and healthcare leaders that have been able to really share their knowledge. Because what's so hard about this, this situation, this pandemic, is there's just no roadmap. So I really feel like in so many ways we're, you know, trying to make the best decisions we can, but it's tough. And so, yeah, it's been wonderful to have the board that I have and to engage them. And we also, like Christy mentioned, have had to have some special meetings. We have had to really dig deep in terms of our budget and trying to forecast what our budget will look like for next year. And we had to make some funding changes in how we fund our nonprofit partners. So it was important for us to have them on board. And I think one of the things that I've learned through this experience is you cannot over communicate. You know, we just put out a lot of information to our board members, and I just feel like keeping them in the loop has just been really important. And like Christy, I have a great board chair, Nora Everett, and I have had to lean on her both personally and professionally, because there are just times where, you know, stress points where you think, oh my gosh, did I make that decision, you know, taking into consideration all that I know at this moment, is that the right decision? And, you know, so many in our community are feeling personal stress and personal situations that you just have to sometimes just pause and reach out to somebody. And hopefully all of you have those people in your lives where you can just do a little self-care and call them up at whatever time it is and just say, help, I need your advice on this, because there is no clear roadmap on how to lead through a pandemic. So yeah, I've been leaning on my board heavily.
Oh, great. Sally, maybe you could give us your perspective on this.
Yeah, we also have a large board. We have a 37-member board of directors, and half of our board is elected officials or municipal representatives, and then the other half are community representatives or cultural representatives. So we have a little bit of a different dynamic on our board. You know, the timing has been interesting for us. We had a board meeting on March the 10th. Our next scheduled board meeting wasn't until June the 9th, and obviously a lot was changing in between that time. And then we're a July 1 fiscal year. So in the midst of all of this, we were also planning leadership transitions, budget transitions, and trying to be planning for FY21. So we certainly tried to engage our full board and amped up our communication to our full board, but we actually took a little bit of a different tack, and we dug in with the one-on-one relationships with our officers and our committee chairs. Sometimes making decisions with 37 people can be challenging. So we were working at a little bit of a smaller advisory group level, particularly on some of the financial discussions. We were forming small group conversations and then reporting back up to the full board, certainly needing to leverage people to check the assumptions. As Christy and Elizabeth said, like, we've never done this before. And yes, we are leaders of our organizations and good at what we do, but this is all new. And so being able to say, does that make sense? Or here's what I was thinking, and having the capacity to reach out to those board members was really, really helpful for us. One of the decisions that our board supported was we did not run 97 different scenarios. We don't have the capacity. I think people, I'm so honored to be sharing this space with Christy and Elizabeth. Christy, I think, has 20 people or more on her team. I know, Elizabeth, you also have a big staff. Bravo's a staff of 3. So we don't have the capacity to run multiple scenarios. So we kind of dug in and said, this is what we're going to do. And these are the assumptions along the way. And here's how we'll iterate as we go. But that was something that was great, that the board wasn't like, I want to see 10 different plans. They said, give us your best bet, and then let us know how you're going to adjust along the way, and what are those milestones along the way where you're going to review. And that was terrific.
So we had a great question come through. I'll just go ahead and read this and remind the audience, if you have questions, open your chat window and type them in there. John Soner, if I mispronounced your name, my apology. He states, thank you all for being here today. My question is related to the intersection of COVID, Black Lives Matters, and nonprofit leadership. In recognition of the disproportionate economic and health impacts that COVID has had on low-income and Black communities, and the recent refocusing of social goals around Black Lives Matter, what role is your organization able to play in uplifting and supporting the Black community within Des Moines? Elizabeth, do you want to start? I gotta believe this is just so much of in so many areas you service, this has really got to be front and center.
Yeah, so thank you, John, for that question. That's a great question. And it's, you know, been our legacy as a United Way that, you know, our mission is that we unite the community around complex problems, and we lead the fight for the health, education, and financial stability of every Central Iowan. So we have really, over the last, 3 or 4 years, been doing some really great work in terms of really trying to own the equity gaps that we have in our community and really focus our energies around reducing those gaps. And so we've been doing it on a number of fronts. We, of course, needed to make sure our staff was prepared. And so for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been doing a lot of work internally to prepare our staff. We've really made a focus on hiring at United Way. We now have 22% of our staff are diverse, which has been a huge gain in the last couple of years, because we know that that diversity is going to help us to make better decisions and going to help us as we interface in our community. We have, because of this intersectionality of COVID and equity gaps, we knew that we were at a point in United Way's history, this United Way's history, where our goals that we set around education, income, and health were ending at the end of 2020. So our plan was to release our new goals in April or May of next year, but because of you know, so many seismic changes that are happening, we really felt the need to accelerate our timeline. So we will be announcing our goals, which are really going to be focusing around an equitable recovery for our community. So more to share as we go forward, but just know that it's been front and center for United Way of Central Iowa. And also, you'll be seeing in the next couple months, we'll be launching what we're calling the 21-day equity challenge for Central Iowans to engage in hopefully some personal learning and growth on those 21-day journeys. So more to come, but great question, John. Thanks.
Christy, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, John, you identified like the trifecta of challenge. And in my time in the nonprofit sector, when you talk about all 3 of the things that you talked about in the question, like I just get this pain because it's just so big. And I think our whole community is feeling that. And especially when you see yourself in a leadership role as an organization, to get your arms around what our nonprofit sector is facing, both with, you know, COVID and the economic downturn, and then you add the just racial divide and conversation that's happening. We're still getting our arms around how we can best lead through this with and for the community. And again, behind the scenes, there are just so many conversations happening, and just the desire to align and to lift up and to work together is certainly there. And we're just kind of figuring it all out together. But I would say, you know, we've been trying to lead when it comes to helping to lead the social capital element of Capital Crossroads as a as an organization. And in developing the For Equity tool, for example, that's been around now for a couple of years, and we continue to try to really get our community to embrace, as well as, you know, nationally that tool has been shared, but also our feedback for equity groups that we have formed to really get diverse voices around. In this case, it's focused on outdoor recreation, the water trails, parks, and other things, but certainly will expand beyond that. And I just think, you know, our board is very open to considering how we can lead through this, but at the same time, we want to lead with and in partnership with, and not necessarily on behalf of or for the community.
Sally.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Christy and Elizabeth said. Christy called it the trifecta. I actually heard someone call it the global crisis turducken, which I thought was kind of a funny way to think about it, because it's just a coming together of things that just maybe don't belong together all at the same time, much like a turducken, in my opinion, though I'm not criticizing anyone who loves turducken. Bravo has the benefit of supporting and serving the cultural sector, and arts and culture are sort of uniquely positioned in this time because there are no boundaries to arts and culture, and it's such a unifying force, and it's something that brings people together in such special ways to share things that might otherwise be difficult to share or talk about. And so we think we have so much opportunity for our sector to be a real unifying force in the conversations around equity in our community. We are doing a couple of things. We're trying to balance immediate action with learning and reflection, because we know that we as an organization have opportunity, and we know that the organizations we support have opportunity. And so we're trying to put boots on the ground and be impactful where we can, and leverage the tools and resources that we have right now, but also be thoughtful of the long-term play, that it isn't just a moment in time, that it is something that we are legitimately committed to and resourcing and focused on for the long term. So a couple of things that we've done in the immediate term is we've really amped up some of our work on arts and social impact, which is something that Bravo's not really well known for. Most people know Bravo as a grant maker, which is where the majority of our resources go. But we're also accelerating our work in the intersectionality of the arts and everything. So how can we make sure that people understand the role that arts can play in some of these conversations? And we've got 2 pilot projects that we're running this fall that are going to be really exciting and stepping into that space, and hopefully highlighting some of the opportunity for arts and culture to amplify these conversations. So we're accelerating that work. We're also digging deep on our grant making. We know the data are the data on funding for arts and culture organizations led by people of color are not where we'd like them to be. And that's national. That's not just Bravo, but we know that we have some opportunities to advance equity through our grant making. So we're actively working, as we have to revise our program altogether, we're actively working on what that could look like and how we can integrate that into our programs. And then we also, as part of our strategic plan that was defined 2 years ago, we set out an objective to lay out a cultural equity plan, both for our organization and that we can then hopefully use to support the organizations we support. And so we are continuing to dig in on that as well. So trying to balance, and then we're all obviously learning and reading and interacting and trying to be conscious of our own biases and how we can work together. So those are some of the ways we've activated.
One other, if you don't, can I add one more thing? One other thing, just as nonprofit leaders and those working on behalf of our community and of the sector, something else that I at least have tried to be really intentional about is allowing my team to have time to process what we've experienced over the last several months, but also to be vulnerable and to support each other. So we've really tried to be intentional about having set aside time to debrief, whether it was in the beginning working, the countless hours, very long hours, to get so many things in place on behalf of the sector, or to watch what the racial inequity and conversation has been and impact on the community, but really to come together as a staff team to process this entire experience. And, I'd be interested in what others have done, but I just think it's so important because we're working so hard on behalf of all of those that we serve. But it's also important to take care of each other and ourselves. And so I just wanted to put that out there as a reminder when we're dealing with such heavy topics and work.
Well, I can speak for the partnership, even though I'm not in the leadership of the partnership. I know we've been doing a lot of the same thing, and it's been interesting. You talked about unintended biases, and that's probably, if anything, sharpening that for all of us has been very critical. I think that the time amongst each other, or getting to know each other, I found it interesting that I've gotten to know more of my staff members on Zoom than I did in person. Simply because we're all together and we're all more engaged, because when the camera's on, you kind of have to be present. So it's been interesting. Let's go back and maybe each of you could give a little bit of advice. There are other people on the call that are involved with nonprofits and probably not the scale maybe that you are. What advice do you have for others managing nonprofits, especially going forward? I mean, I remember my corporate days, we're coming into planning season if you're on an annual budget. Right? It's planning time. We would be starting budgets next month. And I think about all of you that are on an annual, and I know, Sally, you said you're on you're offset 6 months, but I'm just curious, as you look at planning the next year, because we know this isn't going away tomorrow, what type of advice would you give those who are running perhaps smaller nonprofits, or different nonprofits, and Elizabeth, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, and I don't know if my advice is just about nonprofits, but about leading in this time. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of tough decisions that we're all having to make. And as I mentioned earlier, there just isn't a clear roadmap, and things are changing so frequently and so fast. And we're all looking at so many different sources. So, just sometimes just breathing, I have to just kind of say to myself, okay, you're running around like a crazy person. Just, pause for a second here and, kind of get some control here, because it's tough. It's really tough. And some of the ways that I have leaned in and my leadership team has leaned in together is that we have really, because of the isolation that we've had, with working remotely, we've leaned into a daily checkpoint with us just to talk about, our agenda of things, but also, how's everybody doing personally? And we started really with a framework that's allowed us to lead, we think, well through this. Is we start by, when we hit a bump or a major decision that we have to make, we really start by spending a few minutes just writing down and agreeing on what is our goal. What are we trying to accomplish from this decision, or from this point of a decision? And it can be things like, protecting the safety of our staff, maybe our first goal. It could be something like making sure that we lean into funding our community partners at the highest level possible. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, and it just depends on what the issue is or what the scenario is. And then, frequently we do, even like with our budgeting, our budget started July 1. So, we had to try to forecast different scenarios. What's it going to look like for a 5% cut? What's it going to look like for a 25% cut? So just kind of doing some scenarios that would help us, and then just get comfortable with making the decision. And we may be wrong with this pandemic, and the equity lens that we're all using now, just you may not make the best, the right decision, but you made the best decision with the fact pattern you had at that moment, and being comfortable with it, and then just over communicating. And I mean, we've gotten to, every Friday I'm doing a weekly email to my staff with, some, of course, some heavy stuff, but also some light stuff. And, sharing that things like in my staff, people are not taking any vacation time. And we're going to, give yourself a break. You can go, even if it just means, getting away from your computer for a day and getting in your car and driving to Grimes or wherever you want to go. But it's just, we have to over communicate because there are so many stressors on everybody from personal to professional. So I guess that's my advice at this moment, but I know all of you on this in this session are great leaders too. So you probably have some good things you can share with us.
Sally, do you want to add anything to that? That was very good, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yeah, good advice, Elizabeth. I was taking notes while you were talking, as usual when I'm on a call with you. I would just add just a couple of things. One is I think that as we're all talking about communicating and how important that is, I think what we're all really saying is that it's really dialogue. It's not necessarily you shoveling out information at this point. It's you opening the door to conversations. And so I think that's one thing that would be a piece of advice, is to don't feel like you have to have all the answers. It's okay to say, this is the question that I'm wrestling with right now, and invite people in to that dialogue with you, because we're all learning together and have different perspectives, and the thoughts from the greater whole could be good. The other thing that I would challenge everyone on this call to think about is like what's really essential and core about what you do, and what can you reimagine. And certainly would never make light of what's happening in the world or in our community, but this is also an opportunity for a lot of organizations to reimagine assumptions and challenge ways that we've done things. And so my advice would be, don't miss the opportunity part of it. As we go, think about how you can reimagine things, and don't take things artificially off the table. Be intentional about how you're moving forward in the things that you're considering.
Christy, you have the unenviable position trying to add to all of that. That's great.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think they covered everything I wanted to, other than just to say what I'm noticing more now than I did in 2008, 2009, during the economic downturn, as I was working with the nonprofits in the community, is I think there's an increased acceptance of it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to reach out and have conversations about the what ifs. And I'm seeing a lot more nonprofits reach out to us and say, who do you know that I could align with? Or who do you know that I could come together with? Or could we, this organization and me have these things in common. We're both sort of capital heavy. We kind of serve the same thing, but not really. But how could we come together on the back end to be more efficient? And I am seeing that conversation happen more often already. And I'm not, that will continue, no doubt about it. But I'm really encouraged by that, because I think it gets to what Sally said. It is okay to reimagine. This is an opportunity, and to really stay focused on the core, but what are the things that you might be able to give up or realign with somebody else?
One of the calls we did earlier was with a couple of the chief medical officers at hospitals here in the area and care facilities. And one of them, and I apologize, I can't remember which one of the doctors said this, but he said, give a little grace. We're all trying to do a whole lot at once, and we don't know the answers. And I think to your own teams, to the people you're partnering with, just a little more grace is a good thing. We have a question here from Claire Ryman, and it says, thank you for your expertise. How have you been communicating with both sides, your donors and those you're funding? And Elizabeth, you mentioned some of the things you're doing internally too, and I think that's very key as well. Maybe if you each just want to touch on a couple of examples of something you're doing new since all this happened, or some specific what's being the most effective. Sally, you want to start?
Sure. One of the things that we've done, Bravo is currently supporting 74 cultural organizations in Greater Des Moines. We have organizations that have annual operating budgets of $2,000, and we have organizations that have annual operating budgets of $25 million. So there's a wide range. One of the things that we've realized through this is that even with that wide range of operations and media that they serve, there are some commonalities. And so we have pulled all of our cultural partners together we do a monthly-ish, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks calls, just to talk about what is specific and unique to our sector. And we have been the convener. We are certainly not providing expertise in all of these cases, but it's been amazing for us to see how much commonality and collaboration comes out of just creating space for those conversations among these organizations.
Christy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
You know, one thing new, I think, would be the community conversation circles that our organizations have come together. We were here to offer. We were hearing from the nonprofit sector that they just wanted to be together and they wanted to feel heard, and even with each other. And so I think that that's been a great addition. And then in terms of donors, this was an opportunity for our donor serving team to do a lot of individualized outreach, you know, handwritten notes, really. And we found that donors were answering the phone and they were ready to have conversations because they had time and they were home and they were, you know, willing to do that. And it finally was the time that many of them were able to focus on their will or their estate plan, things that they'd been meaning to do. But this particular situation really kind of forced their hand in completing it. So our timing, we found to be right in that.
Elizabeth, we just have a couple of minutes left. Do you have something you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that, and it kind of follows what Christy is saying, is one of the fun, good things that's come out of this has been really the one-on-one reach outs that we've all been doing too, like Christy mentions, notes, calls, virtual conversations. It's really strengthened a lot of our relationships, which has been great. At the beginning, I called them wellness checks, but it's really become much, much more than that. And then we have really facilitated a large number of virtual sessions like this with different donor circles that we have. Our largest donors and then some of our youngest donors. And the thing that has been the most appealing for them is they really want to hear about our COVID-19 response. And so they're interested in hearing, you know, what are the average 211 callers saying? What's the trends? What, you know, just sharing kind of insider stuff about what we're doing behind the scenes. And we have plenty, all three of our organizations, to share on that. And so that's been fun to just have those sessions with donors around the work that we're doing. And really, you know, this is what United Way has been built for. This is what we can do well in our community. So it's been great.
Sally and Christy, I know you both need to leave very, very quickly. So I'm going to ask this of all three of you. The last question today is, speaking of opportunities, what would you each say is your silver lining moment of the recent events? And maybe what we'll do is we'll, after this, reach out to you and ask you to maybe give us a short written response, and we'll include that in the post we put up. We're going to put this video up for everyone who wants to see it and people that weren't able to, and maybe we could just ask each of you, and I'll reach out with a separate email so you don't have to worry about writing it down, but just perhaps what has been a silver lining moment, and maybe we can include that in the write-up. Well, with that, I know we're out of time. I want to thank all three of you so much for joining us today, and to the audience for joining us. And remember, for all of you listening and watching, we have a lot of information on our website, dsmpartnership.com/DSM Forward. And I know all three of the organizations here also have had a tremendous amount of information come out recently. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone one more time. And with that, we'll end the call.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Bye, Sally.